Hi, this is Sandy Simpson taking a little side trip into the mythological world of George Otis Jr. and his Transformations video series for a moment. Transformations 1 and 2 have made the rounds of many churches, touting not only the spiritual warfare techniques of C. Peter Wagner, John Dawson, and the New Apostolic Reformation, but claiming spectacular results from those techniques being used all over the world. George Otis Jr., as previously mentioned in another program segment, is head of the Sentinel Group based out of Ted Haggard's New Life Church in Colorado Springs, Colorado. He's taught groups such as YWAM his moral government theology, and is now in the business of traveling around the world collecting alleged evidence that spiritual mapping and binding territorial demons actually works. I want to deal with this issue in short order as we view some scenes from the Transformations 1 video. If you want to check the facts instead of swallowing the mythology, I urge you to read an article by concerned Christians called Transformations or Retransformation, a Paradigm Shift for Evangelism. And that title and web address will come up on the screen now. You'll be able to follow links to all the research material available there. Now I'm going to give you just a few examples of myths that Otis presented and the actual facts about each locality named on the Transformations 1 video. I don't know whether these and hundreds of other false facts were presented because of bad reporting or in an attempt to try to fool people, but many of the facts were either wrong or simply non-existent. Cali Colombia was one of the alleged transformation cities. Claim:
the violence was getting worse. The church was really feeling the pressure of what was going on. And they prayed against principalities and powers. They prayed for unity. They believed in God to see Him move in the churches.
48 hours after the event, the daily newspaper headlined, "No Homicides."
The video claims in 1995 there were 15 killings a day.
Prayer events, united prayer events were going on. That's when we started seeing the results. And 10 days later, the first drug lord fell, and God was changing the city. There were 7 top drug lords, 6 had fallen in those 9 months when we really started praying together.
The whole spiritual atmosphere of the city of Cali has changed.
The facts? Well, there's no evidence in the Cali paper of June 20, 1995, or that time period, that the stated killings had stopped. We do know that the 6,500 elite commandos were dispatched to Cali with explicit orders to round up the cartel ringleaders. But just because homicides ceased for a day does not mean much in Cali or in Colombia. And how is this really attributable to their prayer event? The murder rate? It's changed little in Colombia, with 25,660 recorded homicides in the year 2000 and an average 70 killings per day. Colombia's murder rate is among the highest in the world, in line with the country's reputation as one of the world's most dangerous places. In October 1999, Transparency International issued its annual Corruption Perceptions Index, which ranked 99 countries based on levels of corruption perceived by experts and the general public. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the least corrupt, Colombia received a score of 2.9, making it the 6th most corrupt country of those surveyed in Latin America. Claim. The video claims Cali exported 1,000 tons of cocaine a year to the US and Europe. Fact. Government reports say potential cocaine production was estimated by the U.S. government to be 760 metric tons in 1996 for all of Colombia. The city of Cali is not solely responsible for drug exports for the whole nation, obviously. Claim. Julio Ruibal stated before he was terribly shot down, he said this: "The whole spiritual atmosphere of Cali has changed." The video says Cali is now a safe city, where a significant percentage of the population is now safe and revival flourishes. Instead of a city where people lived in fear, people now safely walk the streets.
To freely walk the streets that once held so much terror is testimony to the remarkable changes that have come to Cali.
Fact. The news from Colombia at the time of the writing of this article was anything but encouraging. The newspaper stated that leftist guerrillas killed 6 people and kidnapped several others. Bomb attacks in Cali Colombia's third largest city leveled buildings near a military base and injured 3 people. That was Friday the 9th, March 2001. So nothing has changed. It's been like this for many years. Claim. In the video, George Otis Jr. states Cali is a safe city where a significant percentage of the population is now safe and revival flourishes. Instead of a city where people lived in fear, people now safely walk the streets.
There's a hunger for God everywhere. I mean, you can see it in the buses, on the streets. You can talk to anybody, anywhere you go.
Church leaders believe this spiritual hunger is a direct result of their unity and fervent prayer. It's a process that continues with repentance and reconciliation, sweeping away barriers to evangelism.
Fact, even Ruibal's newsletter of Ecclesia says the opposite. Satanic groups are attacking churches and Christians, especially in Cali. Some churches have suffered repeated attacks, said Consuelo Zuluaga, a social worker from Justa Paz. A quote from the October 1999 newsletter from Ruth Ruibal said this, quote, "The church in Cali confirms the news that we receive through the media in the USA. Naturally speaking, the political and economical situation seem to be going from bad to worse. In fact, this Sunday before I left on this trip, there was a guerrilla infiltration in our church service. So the very people who were making testimony before are saying it's going from bad to worse." Moving on to Malunga Guatemala, as it was mentioned in the transformation video. Claim. After prayer and fasting, it gave them victory over principalities in Malunga.
The city's 20-some thousand inhabitants have made a conscious choice to sever the continuum with ancestral spirit worship. As a consequence, Malunga is today one of the cleanest, most prosperous towns in all of Guatemala. It's a city of churches.
Well, fact, as in Colombia, the government statistics state that the prevailing form of religion in Guatemala is Roman Catholicism. There are few Protestants and Jews. The story of a small town having many converted was true. It did happen. But it didn't happen overnight. And it absolutely did not happen using spiritual warfare techniques as the video insinuates. All this happened back in the 1970s in a true evangelistic revival, long before spiritual warfare techniques had come into vogue. While this is a fantastic news to hear, I think it's a misrepresentation to use Malunga as part of the video, implying that it was due to spiritual mapping or anything of that nature. Claim. Malunga is said to be one of the cleanest, most prosperous towns in all of Guatemala. George Otis Jr. makes a direct correlation to the people becoming Christian and the soil producing massive crops. From the vegetable scenes, the insinuation is that the vegetables grew so large as a result of God's blessing from prayer. We're told it's because the Christians in Malunga united in prayer and fought the principalities and powers, and then God outpoured his blessing.
Prayer and fasting gives us victories over principalities. It wasn't a theological preparation, it was simply throwing ourselves to the Lord.
God even changed the fertility of the soil. God did this through casting out the strongholds of Satan. Not only tearing them down, but also casting them out. This supposedly brought about a healing of the people and a healing of the land. Intercession, spiritual warfare, and evangelism transformed the city. And it's now a bustling commercial district. Well, facts. Guatemala is located in the tropic zone, as you know, and agriculture accounts for about 1/4 of Guatemala's GNP, employing more than 1/2 of the workforce, and generates more than 3/5 of all exports. Although production of basic grain crops, principally corn and maize, has increased, guess what? All that crop stuff is not significant to meet the needs of the population. Furthermore, there's a claim in the video that reports
Even the town's agricultural base has come to life. For years, crop yields around Malunga suffered from a combination of arid land and poor work habits. But as the people have turned to God, they have seen a remarkable transformation of their land.
And Malunga became a fertile valley. It is so fertile that the land is so good. They produce the best vegetables. They get as many as 3 harvests per year. They sell their vegetables to Guatemala, south of Mexico, and El Salvador.
Before the spiritual turnaround, growers were exporting 4 truckloads of produce a month. Now they leave town 40 times a week. Nicknamed America's Vegetable Garden, Al Malunga's produce is of biblical proportions.
You have to see them to believe. A beet is 4.5 pounds. A carrot is this size. It is just unbelievable.
The video, when interviewing a local states, Al Malunga became a fertile valley. It's so fertile that the land is so good they produce the best vegetables. They get as many as 3 harvests per year. They sell their vegetables to Guatemala, south of Mexico, and also in El Salvador. Before the spiritual turnaround, growers were exporting 4 truckloads of produce a month, and now they leave town 40 times a week. Quote, "The wisdom that God gave the farmers in Al Malunga produced a better crop than the scientific methods yielded, and the farmers give God the glory for the bountiful harvest. At the same time, people believed in Jesus Christ. At the same time, the vegetables started growing." Well, the facts are this. The vegetable growth improved as the people became more diligent in their work habits. Nothing shown in the video or in reports proves anything supernatural had occurred. There was an ongoing war that lasted 36 years in Guatemala, which brought agriculture to a near standstill, with fields being burned, people disappearing, farmers being killed, etc. This ended in the early or mid-1990s. When the land rests, it becomes more fertile when crops are planted. So when George Otis Jr. describes researchers going there to learn the secret, saying the answer is not what they expected, it's not going to be what you expect either. The farmers give God the glory for the bountiful harvest. This may be true, but what they're not telling you in this video is about the additives and pesticides that helped this growth. Besides good volcanic soil and abundance of water, the only thing we found from researchers proved that they are using pesticides for boosting the growth in the vegetables. In fact, these pesticides are illegal in the U.S. This very well could be why they have such an increase in agriculture. This is a report from one researcher, quote, "As the case in Al Malunga, Guatemala, a lot of Latin American cities see the need to keep both traditional and export crops full of pesticides. However, the same pesticides that keep the food from having blemishes and insect bites may very well make the inhabitants sick. For instance, the public health records show that there is an increase in certain ailments that can be directly related to overuse of pesticides." And that's from Arbona, 1998. Dr. Arbona is a geographer, worked at the same time as an epidemiologist with the Texas Department of Health, Austin, Texas. So things aren't quite so nice as they seem down there. Let's go and move on to Chiambo Kenya. That was used as an example of the positive effects of spiritual warfare. The claims were this. Thomas Muthi says,
"Because of the bad reputation of the town, nobody wanted to come out.
It was depressed." He's talking about Chiambo. The churches in the town were not growing. Crime rate was the worst in the nation. They preach the gospel, but the people just don't get saved. All these things are presented as in the past, and a radical change has taken place. Chiambo is described as a city of 60,000 in the video, which was steeped in witchcraft and has experienced church growth in the wake of prayer, significant in an area where no church has ever grown beyond 24 believers, according to them. They quote Wagner in his book, Praying with Power, stating that Mr. Muthi felt God's call to start a church in Chiambo, Kenya. Chiambo had a national reputation as a murder capital with the highest crime rate in all of Kenya. Local churches remained small and persecuted. With a great deal of reluctance to go to Chiambo, Mr. Muthi brought together a few prayer partners and prayed fervently. The church he started soon was known as the Prayer Cave Church because so much prayer happened and prayers were answered. Within 1 year, not only did the church grow to 4,000 members, but the Chiambo population of 80,000 saw their community transformed into a peaceful, nonviolent society. What are the facts? Actually, Muthi, first of all, did not want to visit Chiambo when he was doing his spiritual research. He did not so much as visit Chiambo, only 10 miles from his home during that period, quote unquote. "I would not want to step my foot into Chiambo until the spiritual forces of darkness over the city have lost their grip." This is what he reported. This doesn't sound like someone having boldness from the Lord who told him to go there. How is he going to learn about the area and the people without going there? Okay, which is it? Is it a population of 60,000 or 80,000? Well, once again, those figures are inaccurate as well, both in the video and in Wagner's book, as they have been throughout the video. Here's the official report, and it matches neither of them. Why? Chiambo is a district, not a city, and over 1.5 million people live there. And when Muthi began there in 1989, it certainly was not 80,000, more like 900,000. Claim: no one was coming to Chiambo because it was depressed. Now that Chiambo has a good name, people from Nairobi are flocking to get houses there. Population is up by 30%. The implication is that the town has been cleaned up from being a destitute area. What was once depressed because of a witch is now prosperous, all because she was made to leave town. Well, the fact is, the slums are not gone, and they have them like any other sizable city or district. And I suspect the video shots were of the worst areas, making it kind of look like an incredible change had taken place. Another claim: the crime rate was the worst in the nation.
The entire atmosphere changed. Where once people used to be afraid to go out at night, Chiambo now enjoys one of the lowest crime rates in the country. Local bars have been closed and remodeled into churches.
Well, the facts, what are they? Has it changed? Not even close. At least not according to Kenya's own news and government reports. There's one article telling about Chiambo being taken over by killer gangs. An urban violence article was done in the mid to late 1990s because of land corruption and other schemes. This led to urban decay and urban disorganization, leading to the mushrooming of urban slums. This aggravates, of course, crime and violence. Chiambo district rates of violence are a reflection of the Nairobi crime patterns and trends. Up to 70% of Nairobi residents live in slums. 80% of the city population are low-income earners. And 20% of the population that are high-income earners occupy 60% of the city's land. One respondent quips, quote, "These days we sleep with one eye open and one ear open. In both Chiambo and Nyahururu, adults are often in 50-50 chances to be victimized either by someone they knew or a stranger. The urban elderly, 75%, indicate they are afraid to walk at night in Chiambo town. Violent robbery incidents, which became quite rampant since last year in Kenya's capital city, Nairobi, have spilled over into neighboring central province districts, Thika, Murang'a, and Chiambo. Kenya police see the crime problem affecting the central Kenya districts, particularly Chiambo, as a manifestation of social disparities in an elite district with a lot of city influence. Hordes of jobless, idle, and thus disillusioned youth who throng the shopping centers of the districts can easily be distracted to crime, as there are many rich business people and professionals residing in the districts, especially Chiambo. Okay, the point is that violence and disparity were there when the video was made, and it continues today. Yet, we're told from an article adopted from Praying with Power by C. Peter Wagner, economically, Chiambo is now prosperous. The crime and violence associated with the city and the national media has now virtually disappeared. Some of the most notorious criminals of the city are now saved and are members of the Prayer Cave. That's Global Revival News and Joel News International. Another claim was made. The video says that they had to confront the source of Chiambo's spiritual oppression. The problem was identifying what the devil was doing to the people. The spirit of witchcraft was resting over the place.
And at the end of 6 months, we got an assurance in our spirits. The spiritual power over the town had been broken.
Seizing this window of opportunity, Thomas conducted his first outdoor crusade. By the end of the first week, more than 200 people had committed their hearts to Christ.
After he prayed, within days, Mama Jane was stripped of her power. Within weeks, she packed up and left town. Once this power of witchcraft, the principality that was over Chiambo, was broken, then the presence of God started to hover around the town, unquote. Another quote, "The entire atmosphere changed," unquote. The video further describes a thick depression descended upon prayer and worship services and remained until elders discovered Mama Jane's handiwork outside the church. They show her in the video planting fetishes at the church grounds. Realizing they are dealing with demonic influences, the believers took authority over the situation, unquote. The facts? Muthi says it all pointed to one woman, Mama Jane. They prayed and fasted, and the Lord showed them the spirit of witchcraft. Now, this is no great revelation, and one would not have to do spiritual mapping to find this out. Witchcraft is very common in Africa, and from what I understand of Kenyan culture, on numerous street corners one can encounter practicing witches and witch doctors. Mama Jane may have been one of the biggest witches, but she was not the only one. Yet Muthi has all the problems blamed on only one person. Actually, this principality, according to Muthi, held back God's presence. This is why people wouldn't get saved. You know, I'm sorry, but I don't think God is that weak, do you? In the video, they showed a woman doing her spells, which we highly doubt is Mama Jane, the witch. Since witches don't allow themselves to be videoed, doing their craft, we believe that this is actually a reenactment, which of course is not stated as such on the video. Mama Jane, the witch, is filmed as placing a fetish in her church structure, which was powerful enough to affect the church. The video then says a thick oppression descended upon prayer and worship services from Mama Jane's opposition. According to the video, this was after the spirit of witchcraft and principalities was already broken. Now, if the spiritual power over the town was already broken and the oppression was due to Mama Jane, how is it that she could bring such oppression on the church? Can one witch do so much damage to the people of God? The video says within days, Mama Jane was stripped of her power. Within weeks, she packed up and left town. But the video, it shows her, the real one this time, being escorted by police and very unhappy. It appears to us that they got her on some kind of legal charge and the police were taking her in. Another claim is made. They claim, quote, they preached the gospel, but the people weren't getting saved. After 6 months of praying, doing warfare, the spiritual power over the town had been broken. But is the gospel no longer the power of God for salvation? Now it's warfare prayer that becomes the power. The video presents spirits that stopped the presence of God. You know what? That's plain superstition. What it does is attribute overcoming factor to their prayer and that God was too weak to do anything without that. This is what you would expect from a word faith church, which is what this church is. The Kenyan pastor said, once the power of witchcraft was broken, then the presence of God started to hover over the town. What kind of concept of God does this man have? What he implies is that God was held back by the power of witchcraft. And finally, we move on to Hemet, California, which is cited as a transformation city. Claim.
You name it, God has just turned the school system around, and to the point where we used to be one of the laughingstock school districts, where nobody wanted to send their kids to school in the San Jacinto School District. Now our students have some of the highest academic ratings and one of the lowest dropout ratings in all of the western United States.
The video then shows the Anza Elementary School. How many dropouts are there in elementary school, I wonder? Well, the facts are this. As far as we can see, this claim is completely false. There are not any blue ribbon programs, nor are they on California's distinguished school program of any year that we could find. The scores for 1998, 99, 2000 for Hemet and De Anza Elementary are not impressive. The data shows that with only a few exceptions, a majority of the students at De Anza score below the national average for all students in that grade and subject category. That is, fewer than 50% score at or above the national average. There are some exceptions, but that was the basic average. Another claim was made.
Church attendance now stands at about 14%, double what it was just 10 years ago.
The fact the population of Hemet is about 100,000. With such a small amount of people, one would think that a church doubling in 10 years would be reasonable. Many often do, and I might add, without those spiritual warfare methods. The church attendance increased 14% because in 10 years the population doubled and many younger people moved to this retirement area. In the last 15 years, the city has changed with many new families and youth living there, so it's no longer just a retirement community. The property was cheap and many young people have moved there and commute. So there's a lot of construction going on. Many communities have church doubling or tripling without warfare prayer, but by simply doing work of evangelism. Another claim was made.
Lots of Satanism, witchcraft. We had the Moonies in the valley, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, TM, Transcendental Meditation Facilities, and Church of Scientology.
Cult membership, once a serious threat, has sunk to less than 0.3% of the population. The Church of Scientology is still present, but many other groups are long gone. The Transcendental Meditation Training Center was literally burned out. Shortly after believers prayed for its removal, a brush fire started in the mountains on the west side of the valley. It burned only the TM facility and didn't touch any of the buildings on either side.
The Scientology Church, apparently Hemet was Hubbard's headquarters at Golden Springs Road, they admit is still there, but they claim the Moonies, Satanism, and others are gone. Well, what are the actual facts? Are they really gone? With just a cursory look, we found churches of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Jehovah's Witnesses, Religious Science, Unity Church, Christian Science Centers, United Pentecostal churches, Unitarian churches, and others that are clearly cults or very questionable. Did they just overlook these groups? Maybe they think these groups aren't really cults. These were just the ones that were listed on the web. There are obviously more than that in this city. So is this accurate? Is the cult membership 0.3% of the population? That would be 300 people if the population were 100,000 people as it is today. When this video was made in 1997, the population was closer to 52,000. So 0.3% of 52,315 would equal 156 people. Now, how realistic is this number? Let's look at just a few actual cult numbers from Hemet. Hemet LDS Mormon churches have 9 wards there with 500 members each, and that equals 4,500 members. First Church of Christian Scientists has 43 members, and Jehovah's Witness has 1,000 members in 8 churches. So that's a big problem. Another claim was made.
We discovered that we were methamphetamine manufacturing capital of the West Coast.
It turns out the Hemet Valley was also a major drug center. At least 9 methamphetamine labs operated out of the area, each benefiting from the dry climate, remote location, and friendly law enforcement. According to Sonny, Hemet's drug trade has dropped by as much as 75%. He gives much of the credit to intercessors.
They took a multi-million-dollar drug corporation and made it run with its tail between its legs.
The fact, first of all, it's Riverside County that is considered a high methamphetamine area. So they got this wrong. It's not this lone small area that's within the county that is the center. The second claim is from Sonny, the meth dealer.
I've actually had law enforcement officers transport methamphetamine for me in their police cars.
Sonny often cooked up enough meth in a given month to supply more than 1 million people.
What are the actual facts about that? Well, there were 2,691 meth labs found in California. 228 were super labs in California. Now, a super lab is defined as a lab that can produce 10 pounds or more of methamphetamine. In 1996, the DEA seized 1,431 kilograms, and in 1997, they seized 16,027 kilograms. Here's some info that might make it possible to calculate if enough meth can be manufactured in 1 month for 1 million people. How much does meth cost on the street? Well, the cost varies according to several factors, but it's somewhere, approximate prices are somewhere between about $25 per quarter gram or $100 per gram. That would make it $1,700 per ounce. Experts estimate that 1 ounce of meth equals about 110 hits. So if 1 ounce supplies approximately 3 people for 1 hit per day per month, that would be 300,333 ounces needed to supply 1 million people. Since 16 ounces of dry measure equals 1 pound, he would have to produce 20,833 pounds per month to supply each of the 1 million meth addicts for 1 hit per day each day for 1 month. It's highly doubtful that it was possible for him to produce 10 tons of meth in 1 month. I highly doubt that meth users are only taking 1 hit per day either. If 1 ounce costs $1,700 and constitutes about 110 meth hits, then 1 hit would cost about $15. At that price, you can be sure that people are taking more than 1 hit. I've heard of people who have about $1,000 per day meth habit. But we also encounter another problem, and an extremely serious one. Each pound of meth produced leaves behind 5 or 6 pounds of toxic waste. Meth cooks often pour leftover chemicals and byproduct sludge down drains in nearby plumbing, storm drains, and directly into the ground. Chlorinated solvents and other toxic byproducts used to make meth pose long-term hazards because they can persist in the soil and groundwater for years. Cleanup costs are exorbitant because solvent-contaminated soil usually must be incinerated. If each pound leaves behind 5 or 6 pounds of toxic waste, this one person was getting rid of a whopping 104,165 to approximately 124,998 pounds of waste per month, which would be 52 to 62 tons of waste material. Now, you know what? He wasn't exaggerating when he needed police help. So this is a big problem. Let's go on to the summary. Otis states,
For the last hour, we followed the road to community transformation through neighborhoods on 3 continents. And along the way, our eyes have feasted on the handiwork of God in individual lives and entire social structures. And not one of these stories has been an aberration. Rather, they're reflections of divine intent. They're the way things are supposed to be.
What I found is that they're mostly exaggerations and fabrications. Please read the full article on this subject as it comes up on screen again, called Transformations or Retransformation, a Paradigm Shift for Evangelism. Many, many more facts there. And read 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. The Bible tells us overall things will get worse, not better. The only way we'll change permanently is when Jesus Christ comes back physically to rule and judge the earth in his millennial kingdom. This Transformations video is a perfect example of people not paying attention to details, of bad reporting, and many unsuspecting Christians simply accepting what is being presented without testing to see if it's true. You know what? We're supposed to test everything. Hold on to the good. This video is some of the sloppiest research I've ever seen. If a newspaper printed an article with this many skewed facts, they'd be sued if they didn't print a retraction. This quick overview is presented so that you can see the connection between the Transformation series and the New Apostolic Reformation agenda.